Welcome to the Whimsy Stamps YouTube channel. This is Tammy, Plays Well with Paper, and I have a pirate Halloween card to share with you today. I'm really into pirates for Halloween this year. In fact, I even got a pirate Halloween costume so that I can hand out candy to the kids in it. So I just thought that these Blimey pirates and all of the pirate stamps and dies and things were perfect for Halloween this year. And so I pulled some of them to put a card together. And of course, the star of the show is going to be these really fun Blimey Pirate stamps. I love that they're kind of funny, a little bit sinister, and that they have the Blimey Pirates outline dies to go with them to make cutting them out easier. So you don't have to fussy cut. They even have dies for the Ahoy and Yo Ho Ho. And then the treasure map stamps that can work with the treasure map uh, die, but also they just have some great images, little tiny pirate images that I'm going to put to use for the card today. They're going to be peeking out of the windows of this Slimline Wobbly Windows die, and I'm going to be cutting it out of a piece of cracked leather distress cardstock. I'm going to be coloring it brown so it'll look like cracked leather, kind of piratey, I think. And I'm also going to be stamping the pirate images on distress watercolor cardstock as well as distress mixed media heavy stock. They react differently with inks and distress watercolor, and so I wanted to have a chance to stamp it on both and see which images I like best. So here I am stamping the images on the mixed media heavy stock with black soot distress ink. It is an oil-based ink, so it will stand up well with watercolor and distress watercolor pencils. So once I got them stamped onto both types of paper, I got started coloring. And you can see that on the heavy stock, I colored with distress watercolor pencils. And I'm not using the pencils right now. I'm just using a palette that I made from the shavings of the pencils. The distress watercolor pencils just have paper around them. They do not have wood, and so you can save the shavings and put them into a palette and make a simple watercolor palette out of them. It makes watercoloring very easy. So you can see that I kept it fairly neutral, kind of bone colored on all the pirates, and then just put my punches of color in with the sentiments and the bandana. And then on the piece of watercolor paper, I used distress spray stains. I just put a few drops on the mat, and I colored with mostly antique linen, old paper, then pulled it in with a little walnut stain and probably brushed corduroy for the skeletons. And then later on for the sentiments, I used lumberjack plaid and blueprint sketch. And now it was time to cut everything out. And so I went ahead and did that. I cut them all out because, again, I hadn't decided which of the sets I was going to be using. And so I went ahead and cut all of them and then started assembling. I took a piece of the cracked leather distress cardstock, and with the leather side facing up, that's the way that I'm going to cut it when I cut it with this wobbly slimline die. I wanted to color it some browns so that it would look like cracked leather, cracked leather, and I started with gathered twigs spray stain and put some of that on the paper. You can see it's a warm brown, and and you can actually, if you look carefully, you can see it kind of settling in between some of those cracked leather areas. And then I decided I want a little darker, so I went over it with some ground espresso distress spray stain. Let that kind of settle in, dried it, and then this is what we have for our cracked leather. And I love that there's a little bit of kind of worn areas, and then there are some places where you can see that there was some drops of water, so it made it look like, it was stained on the leather. So I think it turned out perfectly. I absolutely love it. This is a piece of watercolor cardstock that I've cut the size of a slimline card. I'm going to give it just a little bit of color. It's going to be the matte for the cracked leather slimline windows that I just colored, and so I don't want it to be anything that is too bold. I'm just going to spray a little bit of, so first I started with water. I sprayed just plain water on my watercolor paper, and I just sprayed a little bit of tumbled glass distress spray stain on it to give it just a little bit of color that could either be the sky or the sea, that will be around the outside edge of the die and that will also show through those slimline wobbly windows. Once I had the background colored, I wanted the windows to be a little more like maybe portholes. And so I just lightly drew in the outline for each window on the background piece and just used my watercolor brush to go through and color the sky a little bit more with some of the Distress spray stain. And also I added a little bit from my Distress watercolor pencils palette and my water brush to color in some darker blues to make the sea area. And that way, when it's behind the pirates, it will kind of just mimic the sea and a porthole. And that's the look I was going for. Now it was time to start adding the details to the porthole areas. So I began by stamping some waves from the Treasure Maps stamp set in Uncharted Mariner on the sea portion of each of the windows. And then I picked one of the ships and stamped it in black soot archival. And in this window, I made a little scene. So it took several stamps to do that. I stamped part of an island. I stamped a sunken ship. And then I picked one of the palm tree dies and I stamped that on the part of the island that was sticking out. And then later on, I'll go back in and I will color in that island. And then in the top one, I stamped the little sea monster coming out, kind of like the Kraken. And there you have the windows. So I arranged the pirates and all of the sentiments and things like that. And I wanted that wobbly window slimline die to stand out. So I cut 3 more out of Distress KRAFT Heavy Stock, which is fairly thick. And I'm going to put those just stacked up behind the cracked leather. And that will pop it up just the tiniest bit. I didn't want to go with foam. I just wanted it popped up just the tiniest bit to just give a little bit of dimension. And it also helps it stand out from the background scenes. And then I messed with where I was placing everything multiple times. And I think in the end, it ended up being in different spots. And I had stamped that first ship in the wrong spot. So I stamped another one on the other side and then covered the mess up with one of the with one of the pirates. So here you can see me starting to assemble. I inked everything with Distress ink in brown, and then I layered all of those CraftStock wobbly frames and got ready to put that all together. I'm using Distress Collage Medium as my adhesive of choice, so sometimes it takes a minute when I'm holding it down to make sure that it dries. And then I start assembling and I kind of forget where I put some things, but in the end, I really like how it turned out. So here is our finished product, and you can see that I chose the watercolor uh, Pirates and the watercolor sentiments. I did add a few brads to the corners. And don't you think that that cracked leather on the wobbly frame really looks piratey and leathery? I just love it. And all the little treasure map scenes poking out from behind, like those are wobbly pirate portholes or out the front of a cave or something like that. I think that's just so fun. And I just like these pirates. I I just love how they're kind of quirky and different. And so great job, Whimsy. I do just love these little guys. Well, that's going to do it for my tutorial today. I want to thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate if you click the like button and if you left a comment below. And please be sure that you are subscribed to the Whimsy Stamps YouTube channel and that you have that notification bell checked so that you are alerted anytime there's new content. And be sure you're following Whimsy Stamps on their other social media platforms for all the new releases and amazing inspiration.